as well as non-profit organizations, otherwise known as non-governmental organizations. Alright, so if you remember, several weeks ago, specifically towards the end of March, we had a discussion like that. I shared something on SCUML, everything that pertains to SCUML basically, on the need to register, the obligations tied to SCUML and all of that. But between then and now, there's been a few changes by virtue of the recent enactment of the new law, the Anti-Money Laundering Act that was enacted June or May 13th. And looking at what we used to have and what we have in the new law, there have been a few changes, a few improvements. And we understand the essence behind some of these laws are to dissuade people from involving themselves in money laundering. So this new law moves it forward in such a way that it helps to achieve its ultimate goal, that is to prevent money laundering. And now, looking at the topic, report obligations, there are several obligations, if you remember from the last time we did it. And by the way, if you've not seen it, I would advise you pause this one right now and then go check that out. So it will be like a building block, so that it doesn't feel like you're building on nothing. Okay. So go back and check that one. You have to scroll down below, then you find it, and then come back and watch this one. All right. So like I was saying, speaking about the obligations, there are several obligations beyond report obligations, but this report obligation seems to be the most critical of all of these obligations. And why? And for me, I think it's because the whole essence of this law is kind of tied to it. Of course, the other obligations, they play their role. They kind of lead to the reporting role. Because if you look at several other obligations, such as the need to train your staff on anti-money laundering obligations, right? They need to train your staff. They need to keep records of at least 5 years of transactions that occurred over those years. And a lot of those things, they are somehow aiding the reporting obligation, because at the point of reporting, maybe when investigation starts, if it's serious, they will have to make recourse to all of those things. And again, before you could even detect that, there's something going on wrong, because there are two categories. I think I'm jumping ahead of myself, so I'll just take it, bit by bit. But speaking about the report obligations, there are basically two categories, right? So the first one is the financial transaction reporting, and the other is suspicious transaction reporting. All right. So for the financial transaction reporting, all this is speaking to is the need for you, for your business to constantly make reports to the required body, to the prescribed body, once the transaction involved exceeds a particular amount. Do you understand? So in the course of having a transaction, you see that the money that will be involved in this transaction exceeds the amount that was stated in the law. Then you need to make the financial reporting. You need to do the financial report. All right. And the other one for the suspicious transaction reporting, that one is where, just like it entails, where you see that, something seems fishy here. This transaction is not straightforward. Some nefarious activities might be going on here. So it's necessary in that situation for you to report. And when you fail to report, there are consequences. All right, we'll be looking at all of those things subsequently. So let's move on to, let's dig deeper into financial transaction reporting. So there are four bases upon which you need to make reports under this financial transaction reporting, and then there's just one for suspicious transaction reporting. Let's get into it quickly. Now, in the case of a single cash transaction, or where you're lodging or transferring funds in excess of 5 million naira in the case of an individual, or 10 million naira in the case of a company, body corporate in general, right? So it is necessary for you to make a currency transaction report to the required body, and usually you make it to the NFIU, the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU. You make it to this body, but then you make it through the SCUML platform. So it's very, very important for you, when you are conducting a transaction that goes beyond 5 million naira for individuals and 10 million naira for body corporates, it's necessary that you make accounts. I mean, you make reports. You know, it's very, very necessary. All right, and the report is called currency transaction report. Now, moving on to the next one. Where there's any single transaction in excess of $10,000, in excess of $10,000, you to make a report known as the cash transaction report. So you need to make this report. Once it exceeds $10,000, you make this report. All right, and it's to be made within 7 days. The one for the currency transaction report is also to be made within 7 days from the date of the transaction. So it applies to both. All right. So another one is transportation of cash or any negotiable instruments. By negotiable instruments, we're talking about instrument that guarantees that certain amount of money will be paid to you at a certain date. It could be check, you know, and all of that. Right. So in the case of any transfer of funds transportation of cash or any negotiable instrument in excess of $10,000 or its equivalent by individual in and out of Nigeria shall be declared to the Nigerian Customs Service. So you need to declare to the Nigerian Customs Service. So the Nigerian Customs Service will now declare, will now forward that declaration to the CBN, yeah, to the CBN and the NFI, the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit. So they will forward it to those people, right? So that's their own duty, but it's for you to make a declaration to the Nigerian Customs Service. I hope you got this right. Okay. So now, in the case of any transfer of funds or securities to or from a foreign country by person or body corporate, including a money service business, of a sum exceeding $10,000, right, or its equivalent, a report must be made to the unit we mentioned earlier, to the CBN as well as the Securities and Exchange Commission. So you have to make a report to these bodies that we just stated, right? And it has to be done in writing within 1 day. Within 1 day from the date of the transaction. Now, let's pay attention to something. In the process of making this report, especially as it pertains to this one, it's important you, in the report, you state the nature and amount of the transfer involved, and also the parties involved, that is the person sending the money or the securities and the person receiving it. It has to be in that report that you're forwarding to the unit, and to the what again? To the CBN, as well as the Securities and Exchange Commission. All right. So so that is that for the financial transaction reporting. Right, so you can see that it involves in a situation where you're exceeding a certain amount of money in the course of a transaction, in the course of transferring funds, lodging funds, you know, all of those. I hope this is clear enough. Now let's move to the suspicious transaction reporting. Now for this one, like I earlier explained, when you detect that a transaction is going on that doesn't seem pure, that doesn't seem that seems to be nefarious in a way, you know, that is criminal, that involves money laundering. Now it's for you to report it. This is where you have the obligation to report. This one does not necessarily have to do with it exceeds this amount of money or something. And obviously, when it comes to suspicious transactions, we usually involve a huge amount of money. So there's no breaking line to this one. But the most important factor here is that you reasonably suspect that money laundering or any such related criminal activities relating to money is being carried out. Alright, so that is that. So if it is suspected or there is a reasonable ground to suspect that a proposed transaction is related to money laundering or some other serious crime, now you are mandated to make a report of that transaction or that pending transaction. You need to make a report, and it has to be done within 24 hours by forwarding the report to the NFIU, right? So you need to forward the report to the NFIU, and then the NFIU will now process the report and then forward it to the relevant law enforcement agency. I hope you get this. So it is very necessary you do this. And just the way I spoke about the report, what was the content in the report, in the case of transfer of funds and security, the same thing applies here as well, right? You need to state the reasons you think that the suspicious thing is happening, you need to state the reasons, and then as well as put the names of the parties involved, the principal and then the beneficiary or beneficiaries involved in that transaction, right? And also, when you do this, don't stop here. You need to take steps towards ensuring that the act of money laundering or such other criminal offense is, should I say, what's the word, is obstructed, is prevented. Do you understand? I hope this is clear enough. So now, talking about suspicious transactions, we've spoken about it from the point of the law, especially the newly enacted Anti-Money Laundering Act 2022, enacted May 13th. Now we need to understand that there are various sectors. When we talk about the designated non-financial businesses and professions, we're talking, and then of course, non-governmental, not-for-profit organizations. We're talking about a variety of industries, right? Especially when it has to do with businesses in general. You span in the legal field and the accounting, the consultancy, the insurance companies, and all of those, right? So we need to understand that what you would detect in an industry, what you would see that will make you feel like something suspicious, is going on here, is different from what you notice in this other industry. What you see in the real estate industry is different from what you see in the legal space. What you see in the consultancy space, in terms of tax, insurance, and all of those things, right? So you need to pay attention to details. So yeah, I have a few examples for you, where a lawyer is instructed by a client to create a company with international presence in such a way that shows that the objective of the company is to be protected, is to be covered, is to be prevented from being known. That's a reasonable ground for you to notice that, you know what, I think something is fishy here, something is going on here. So it's a reasonable ground for you to know that, oh, you need to make a report or something. And yeah, so now in the case of accountants, I think I should mention something as well. In the legal space, we have a duty to our clients to protect the information's communicated, confidentiality in general, right? But then when it involves something that is in pursuant of an illegal purpose, there are exceptions to it. The general is that we need to protect your confidence, which is fine. But then the exception, one of the several exceptions or so, is when it is in furtherance of an illegal act. And of course, in this case, we're discussing something that points towards money laundering. Come on, what is that? Is it something good or not? So we need to know that since it has to do with protecting illicit funds and all of those things, we do not have, the law already provides it already for us to release such information to the necessary body, the leading body being the EFCC. Alright, so without is that on that. In the case of accountants where there are unjustified amount or deposit in the client's account whose origin or cause is difficult to identify, so an amount of money just eats the account, you can't trace the source of all those things, a report is to be made, right? So it's a reasonable ground to suspect money laundering or something like that. Now, in the case of real estate agents, when you quickly replace the buyer's name shortly before the completion of the transaction without clear or sufficient justification, something is fishy, you need to report as well. In the case of dealers in precious metals and precious stones, where there's an attempt to sell high-value jewels that are ordinarily priced at a very high level, and then you decide to sell it for way low, way lower than the original price, is something you might want to suspect. In the case of casinos, for those who operate within that space, buying gambling chips in cash, then requesting to exchange them with a check with the casino or from the casino, right? That one also is it's a reasonable ground for you to detect something. And mind you, we're not saying necessarily what you suspect might materialize, but then you are suspecting that something might be happening. It's your duty to report, and if you don't report, we'll be letting you know what you stand to face, very shortly. Alright, so generally, where a client refuses to submit original files that pertain to his identification, generally, of course, you can want to detect something is wrong there. Something is, something is trying to be hidden. The person is probably trying to hide something, and it's a reasonable ground for you to actually make a report. All right. So, like I said, the penalty, especially when it has to do with suspicious transactions, where you fail to report, from that day that the offense starts to be committed, you will be liable to 1 million naira. That's based on the recent law that was enacted May 13th. You'll be liable for 1 million naira each day until you make the report. So I know you don't want to be there, and I know I don't want to be there too, right? So let's do what is right, right? So the whole essence of this is not for knowledge and to store. It's for me also as a person to put it to use and to, you know, to just play my role, perform my obligation. And you know, like I said earlier, this is a major obligation as far as anti-money laundering is concerned, right? And there are other several obligations that also lead to it. You know, I mentioned some of the obligations such as knowing your customers, keeping stock of details of transactions, records of transactions that you've had at least in the past 5 years. Then, you know, such that when you make a report and there's need for investigations, you have data to support with the investigation for the body involved, right? So all of these obligations, and of course also educating your staff on these anti-money laundering obligations too, because it's by educating them that they're able to detect all of these things. So everything flows down to the point of reporting. So imagine now you know all of those things and you don't report. Of course, like we just mentioned, the penalty attached to suspicious transactions, which is 1 million naira every day. You don't want to be in this place. So now, conclusively, we can say that all the obligations are important, but the need to report further brings out the value, brings out the essence of these laws and also other related laws as well. I hope you've been able to get value for your time, which you've spent here with us today, and I hope you take a step further by implementing this in your business. And like we said, this revolves around varieties of business, varieties of industries. Do you deal in cars? Do you deal in precious metals and goods? All of those things that we mentioned, right? So it's for you to implement all of this, right? So once again, I believe that you've gotten value for your time today, and thank you for tuning in to this broadcast. I hope you put this to use, as well as I hope for myself, were important. Thank you for your time, and once again, we have series of sessions. If you're just joining us today, we have series of sessions we've had in the past, and we hope you check them out. Actually, it is going to help your business. That's one assurance we have for you, and it's all for free. It's all for free. So I hope you deploy all of these resources to your own benefit, and I also trust you have a great day. Thank you for your time, and have a good day. Bye bye.